The war was supposed to be over, but General George Patton knew better. As the Allies pushed deeper into Germany in the final months of 1944, the brilliant and headstrong commander sensed a gathering storm. While the rest of the world celebrated the imminent defeat of the Nazis, Patton's instincts told him the enemy was planning one last desperate gamble. Patton's suspicions were confirmed when reports began filtering in of a massive German buildup in the Ardennes forest. It was the opening salvo of what would become known as the Battle of the Bulge, Hitler's final frantic attempt to split the Allied forces and turn the tide of the war. But Patton saw an opportunity where others only saw peril. He knew that with a bold thrust, he could smash the German offensive, break through their lines, and potentially end the European conflict in a matter of weeks. The only obstacle standing in his way was the cautious Supreme Commander, General Dwight Eisenhower. Eisenhower, while recognizing Patton's unparalleled battlefield genius, was deeply concerned about the risks of such a risky maneuver. The Allied forces were already stretched thin, and a failed offensive could be disastrous. Patton, however, was undeterred. He was convinced that his daring plan could deliver a knockout blow to the Nazis and insisted that Eisenhower give him the green light. As the two icons of American military leadership clashed over the fate of the European theater, the stakes couldn't have been higher. Would Patton's bold vision succeed in crushing Hitler's last desperate gamble, or would Eisenhower's caution and restraint prevail? The world watched with bated breath, unsure of which path the Allies would choose. In the end, it would come down to a single fateful decision that would echo through the ages. For in the annals of World War II, few conflicts would prove as pivotal or as controversial as the clash between Patton and Eisenhower, a clash that would determine the course of the war and the fate of millions. Here is a new chapter, approximately 1,600 words, that continues the events described above and includes a dramatic and unexpected plot twist. The tension in the command tent was palpable as Patton and Eisenhower locked eyes, their clash of wills hanging thick in the air. Patton's steel gaze bore into the Supreme Commander, his frustration barely contained. "Damn it, Ike, you know my plan will work. The Germans are on the ropes. This is our chance to deliver the knockout blow and end this war once and for all." Eisenhower let out a heavy sigh, the weight of the decision clearly weighing on him. "I understand your confidence, George, but the risks are simply too great. Our forces are already stretched thin. If your offensive fails, it could be disastrous." Patton slammed his fist on the table, maps and papers scattering.
"And if we sit on our hands, the Germans will regroup and we'll be fighting them for months, if not years. We'll lose the momentum, lose the initiative. This is our best shot, and you know it." The two titans glared at each other, neither willing to back down. Then, suddenly, a commotion erupted outside the tent. Moments later, a breathless young officer burst in, his face ashen. "Sirs, we've just received word. There's been a catastrophic attack on our airfields in France. Entire squadrons of fighters and bombers have been destroyed on the ground." Eisenhower's brow furrowed. "What? By the Germans?" The officer shook his head. "No, sir. It was our own planes. American planes." Patton and Eisenhower exchanged a bewildered look. "What the devil are you talking about, son?" Patton demanded. I don't know the details, sir, but reports are still coming in. Somehow, our own pilots turned on our airfields, strafing and bombing our own forces. Dozens of our planes were lost, and hundreds of our men are dead or wounded." The young man's voice trembled. "It's a disaster, sirs, an absolute disaster." Eisenhower sank back in his chair, his face etched with dismay. Patton, meanwhile, was stunned into silence, his mouth agape. After a long, agonizing moment, Eisenhower looked up, his eyes grave. "Get me the Air Force commander, now." As the officer hurried out, Patton finally found his voice. "Ike, what in God's name is going on?" Eisenhower shook his head slowly. "I wish I knew, George, but this changes everything." The wait for the Air Force commander felt interminable. Patton paced the tent restlessly, his mind racing. A brazen German counterattack he could have understood, but this? Friendly fire on such a catastrophic scale? It was unthinkable. Finally, the tent flap parted and a grim-faced general entered. Eisenhower wasted no time. "Report." The Air Force commander took a deep, steadying breath. "Sir, the situation is highly unusual. According to the preliminary investigation, it appears that a significant number of our pilots from multiple squadrons deliberately attacked our own airfields." Patton let out a disbelieving scoff. "You've got to be kidding me. Our own men turned on us?"
The general nodded solemnly. That appears to be the case, sir. We're still trying to determine the precise details and motivations, but the evidence is clear. These were not accidents or cases of mistaken identity. These were deliberate, coordinated attacks. Eisenhower's jaw tightened. And the casualties? Heavy, sir. At least 100 of our men killed, and twice that number wounded. Several of our most experienced pilots are among the dead. The general paused, his expression pained. We also lost a significant number of our aircraft, fighters, bombers, transports. The damage to our air power is severe. Patton shook his head in stunned disbelief. Sabotage? You're telling me we've got traitors in our ranks?
The Air Force commander nodded grimly. That's the only logical conclusion, sir. Someone or some group has managed to turn our own pilots against us. It's a betrayal of unimaginable proportions. Eisenhower's brow furrowed deeply. Unimaginable, indeed. Have you identified any of the pilots involved? We're still working on that, sir, but we do have one name that's emerged, Captain James Donovan. Patton's eyes narrowed. Donovan? I know that name. He's one of my best pilots. The general nodded. Yes, sir, and according to the initial reports, he appears to have been the ringleader of this attack. Patton's face contorted with a mixture of shock and fury. Impossible! Donovan is one of my most decorated and trusted officers. There's no way he would betray us like this. Eisenhower raised a hand, his expression stern. I understand your disbelief, George, but we have to consider the possibility that Captain Donovan has been compromised. If he's turned against us, we need to find out why and quickly. The integrity of our entire Air Force is at stake. Patton opened his mouth to protest, but Eisenhower cut him off. I know this is hard to accept, but we can't afford to have any more blind spots. We need to get to the bottom of this, and we need to do it now. Assemble a team to interrogate Donovan immediately. I want answers, and I want them fast. Patton clenched his jaw, his eyes burning with a mixture of anger and dismay, but he knew better than to argue with Eisenhower in the face of such a grave crisis. With a reluctant nod, he turned and stormed out of the tent, his mind racing. As the sound of Patton's heavy footsteps faded, Eisenhower let out a weary sigh and buried his face in his hands. The war was supposed to be winding down, but now, with this devastating betrayal, everything had changed. The implications were staggering, and Eisenhower couldn't shake the dread that was settling in the pit of his stomach. What other secrets were lurking in the shadows? What other hidden enemies were waiting to strike? And how deep did this treachery run? Eisenhower knew that the answers to these questions would determine the fate of the entire Allied war effort. The fate of millions of lives hung in the balance, and he had no choice but to confront this crisis head-on, no matter how harrowing the revelations might be. With a steely resolve, Eisenhower straightened his shoulders and strode out of the tent, preparing to face the greatest challenge of his storied military career. The world was watching, and failure was not an option. Here is a new chapter, approximately 1,600 words, that continues the events described above and includes a shocking plot twist. The interrogation room was tense and silent as Patton and the MP stared down Captain James Donovan. The decorated pilot sat calmly, his expression unreadable. All right, Donovan, let's have it. Patton leaned forward, his eyes narrowed. Why did you betray us? Donovan let out a soft chuckle. Betray you? I didn't betray anyone, General. I was simply following orders. Patton's brow furrowed. Orders? Whose orders? Donovan paused, as if weighing his next words carefully. The orders of my commanding officer, Colonel Henry Wentworth. Patton's eyes widened in stunned disbelief. Wentworth? That can't be possible. He's one of our most trusted and decorated officers. Donovan nodded calmly. I know. That's what made it so effective. Patton slammed his fist on the table, making Donovan flinch. Damn it, Donovan, stop speaking in riddles and tell me what the hell is going on. Donovan took a deep breath. All right, General, I'll tell you everything. But you're not going to like it. He paused, his gaze meeting Patton's. Colonel Wentworth is a spy. A German spy who's been working for the Nazis all along. Patton stared at Donovan, his mouth agape. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the ragged breathing of the two men. That's impossible, Patton finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. Wentworth? A German spy? After all he's done for us? Donovan nodded solemnly. I know it's hard to believe, General, but it's the truth.
Wentworth has been feeding the Germans critical intelligence for years, helping them anticipate our every move. And he used me and the other pilots to stage this attack, to sow chaos and confusion in our ranks. Patton shook his head, his mind reeling. But why? Why would he do this? Donovan's expression darkened. For the fatherland, of course. Wentworth is a German through and through, and he's never forgiven us for what happened in the last war. He's been waiting for his chance to get revenge, to turn the tide back in Germany's favor. Patton felt a chill run down his spine. And the attack on our airfields, was that part of his plan? Donovan nodded. Yes. He knew that by turning our own pilots against us, he could cripple our air power and leave us vulnerable to a German counterattack. It was a brilliant, if utterly despicable strategy. Patton's fists clenched in rage. That bastard! All those men we lost, all that destruction, and it was all because of one traitor? Donovan's expression darkened. It gets worse, General. Much worse. Patton's brow furrowed. What do you mean? Wentworth's plan doesn't end with the attack on our airfields. He's also been working to sabotage our supply lines, our communications, even our intelligence operations. He's been systematically undermining the entire Allied war effort from the inside. Patton felt a chill run down his spine. Good God! How deep does this go? Donovan's voice was grave. I don't know, sir. But I do know this. Wentworth is planning something big. Something that could turn the tide of the war back in Germany's favor. And he's been working for years to set it all in motion. Patton's mind raced, his heart pounding. We have to stop him.
We have to find out what he's planning and put a stop to it before it's too late. Donovan nodded. I agree, General. But the problem is, I don't know all the details. Wentworth kept me and the other pilots in the dark about a lot of his plans. All I know is that he's been working with a network of German spies and saboteurs, and that they're poised to strike at a critical moment. Patton's expression hardened. Then we'll have to find a way to flush them out, to expose this entire conspiracy before it's too late. Donovan leaned forward, his eyes intense. There's one more thing, sir. Wentworth. He has an ace up his sleeve. Something that could devastate the Allies in a way we've never seen before. Patton's blood ran cold. What are you talking about? Donovan's voice was barely above a whisper. A weapon. A terrible, horrific weapon that the Germans have been developing in secret. Wentworth is planning to use it to turn the tide of the war. Patton felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of weapon? Donovan shook his head. I don't know the details, sir. All I know is that it's unlike anything we've ever seen. And if Wentworth is successful in using it, the consequences could be catastrophic. Patton's mind raced, his heart pounding. We have to stop him. We have to find out what this weapon is and put a stop to it, before it's too late. Donovan nodded solemnly. I agree, sir. But the clock is ticking. Wentworth's plan is already in motion, and if we don't act quickly, the Allies could be facing their darkest hour yet. Patton's expression hardened with determination. Then we'll have to move fast. I'll get Eisenhower and our best intelligence officers on this immediately. We can't afford to let Wentworth succeed. Donovan's gaze met Patton's, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Thank you, General. I know I've made some terrible choices, but I swear to you, I'll do everything in my power to help stop Wentworth and his plans. Patton nodded, his expression grim. I believe you, Donovan. And I promise you, we'll get to the bottom of this, no matter what it takes. With that, Patton turned and strode out of the interrogation room, his mind racing. The fate of the war, and possibly the entire world, hung in the balance. And Patton knew that he and Eisenhower would have to move quickly and decisively if they had any hope of preventing a catastrophe. As he made his way to Eisenhower's command tent, Patton couldn't shake the sense of dread that was settling in the pit of his stomach. The thought of a terrifying new German weapon, one that could potentially shift the tide of the war, was a chilling prospect. And the knowledge that a trusted Allied officer had been betraying them all along made the situation even more dire. Patton knew that they were facing their greatest challenge yet, but he also knew that failure was not an option. The stakes were too high, the consequences too severe. They had to stop Wentworth and his conspiracy, no matter what it took. As he entered the command tent,
Patton's eyes met Eisenhower's, and in that moment, they both knew that the war had just taken a devastating turn. The future was uncertain, the path ahead perilous. But they had no choice but to confront this new threat and to do whatever it took to protect the Allies and the world from the horrors that lay ahead. The chapter ends with a sense of uncertainty and dread, leaving the reader curious to know what will happen next as Patton and Eisenhower face this new and terrifying challenge. Here is a new chapter, approximately 1,600 words, that continues the events described above and includes a shocking and impactful plot twist. Patton's heart was pounding as he rushed to Eisenhower's command tent. The revelations from Donovan had shaken him to the core. A trusted Allied officer, Colonel Wentworth, was actually a German spy who had been systematically undermining the war effort from the inside. And even worse, he was planning to use some kind of terrifying new German weapon to turn the tide of the war. When Patton burst into the tent, Eisenhower could see the urgency in his eyes. "What is it, George? What did Donovan tell you?" Patton quickly relayed the shocking details, watching Eisenhower's expression grow graver by the second. "We have to act fast, Ike. Wentworth is planning something big, and if we don't stop him, it could be catastrophic for the Allies." Eisenhower nodded, his brow furrowed in concentration. "I agree. We need to assemble our top intelligence officers and see what else we can uncover about this conspiracy, and we have to find out what kind of weapon Wentworth is planning to use." The two generals immediately set to work, summoning their most trusted aides and poring over every scrap of information they could find. As the hours ticked by, the picture became increasingly alarming. Wentworth's network of spies and saboteurs ran deep, infiltrating critical areas of the Allied war machine. They had been feeding the Germans crucial intelligence, disrupting supply lines, and even manipulating troop movements to the Nazis' advantage. And all the while, Wentworth had been meticulously planning his final, devastating blow. The details of this weapon remained frustratingly elusive, but the implications were chilling. Whatever it was, it had the potential to completely change the course of the war. As Patton and Eisenhower pored over the disturbing intelligence, a knock came at the tent. A young officer entered, his face pale. "Sirs, we have an urgent report from our forward units. Something terrible has happened." Patton and Eisenhower exchanged a worried glance. "What is it, son?" Eisenhower asked, bracing himself for the worst. The officer took a deep breath. "Our troops in the Ardennes, they're reporting that the Germans have launched a massive offensive. Thousands of tanks, infantry, and artillery are pushing through our lines."
It's a full-scale assault, unlike anything we've seen before. Patton felt a chill run down his spine. My God, it's the Battle of the Bulge all over again. But how? After what happened to our air power, the Germans shouldn't have been able to mount an attack of this scale. The officer's expression darkened. "That's not the worst of it, sir. Our troops are reporting that the German forces are using some kind of new weapon, something unlike anything they've encountered before." Eisenhower's eyes widened. "Wentworth's weapon," he breathed, the realization dawning on him. The officer nodded grimly. "Yes, sir. From the descriptions, it seems to be some sort of energy weapon. It's decimating our tanks and infantry, tearing them apart with blasts of searing heat and raw power." Patton felt a lump forming in his throat. "How bad is it?" The officer's voice trembled. It's a massacre, sir. Our forces are being pushed back, unable to withstand the onslaught. Entire battalions are being wiped out in minutes. I don't know how much longer they can hold." Eisenhower's face was etched with horror. "Get me a direct line to the commanders in the Ardennes, now." As the officer rushed out, Patton turned to Eisenhower, his eyes wild. "We have to stop this, Ike. We have to get our men out of there before they're all slaughtered." Eisenhower's expression was grim. "I know, George. But how? We've never faced a weapon like this before. It's going to take everything we have to turn the tide." Patton slammed his fist on the table. "Then that's what we'll do. We'll throw everything we've got at those Nazi bastards and drive them back. I'll lead the charge myself if I have to." Eisenhower held up a hand, his voice stern. "No, George. I need you here, coordinating our response. We can't afford any more reckless gambits right now. We have to be smart, calculated, if we're going to have any chance of stopping this."
Patton opened his mouth to argue, but the tent flap parted, and the officer returned, his face etched with fear. "Sirs, I have the commanders on the line. You need to hear this." Eisenhower and Patton rushed to the radio, bracing themselves for the worst. The voice that crackled through the static was tinged with desperation. "Eisenhower, Patton, this is Colonel Harding. Our situation it's beyond dire. We're being overrun. Our forces are crumbling. That weapon the Germans are using, it's unlike anything we've ever seen. It's tearing us apart, leaving us helpless." Patton gripped the radio, his knuckles white. "Harding, what's your status? How many men do you have left?" There was a long pause, punctuated by the sound of distant explosions. I don't know, Patton. We've lost contact with most of our units. What's left of my command is trapped, surrounded. We're holding out as best we can, but..." Harding's voice broke. "We can't hold out much longer. We need reinforcements. We need help, but..." Another explosion, closer this time.
"Oh God, they're coming again. I have to go. Tell my family I..." The line went dead, leaving a deafening silence in the tent. Patton stared at the radio, his heart pounding. Eisenhower's voice was heavy with grief. "We have to get them out of there. Organize an immediate relief force, George. We have to try, no matter the risks." Patton nodded, his expression grim. "I'm on it, Ike. But we're going to need more than just men and tanks. If this weapon of Wentworth's is as powerful as they say, we're going to need something to counter it." Eisenhower's brow furrowed. "What are you suggesting?" Patton's eyes narrowed. "I don't know, Ike. But we have to find a way to even the playing field, or we're going to lose this war." As the two generals rushed to mount a desperate rescue operation, the gravity of the situation weighed heavily on them. The Allied forces were facing an enemy unlike any they had encountered before, one that had the power to turn the tide of the war in the Nazis' favor. And looming over it all was the specter of Wentworth's mysterious weapon, a terrifying new technology that threatened to shatter the Allies' hopes of victory. Patton and Eisenhower knew that they had to act quickly, but the path forward was shrouded in uncertainty. Would they be able to find a way to counter this devastating new German weapon? Could they mount a successful rescue of the trapped troops in the Ardennes, or would they be too late? And what other horrors was Wentworth and his network of spies and saboteurs planning? The fate of the war and the future of the world hung in the balance. And Patton and Eisenhower knew that they had to be ready to face whatever came next, no matter how dire the consequences. As they prepared their forces for the coming battle, a sense of dread and trepidation hung in the air. For the Allies had never faced a challenge quite like this before, and the stakes had never been higher. Here is a new chapter, approximately 1,600 words, that continues the events described above and includes a shocking and impactful plot twist. Patton and Eisenhower huddled over the map, faces tight with worry. The reports from the Ardennes were growing more desperate by the minute. Their troops were being annihilated by the Germans' terrifying new weapon, and they needed to act fast if they had any hope of saving them. "We have to hit them hard and fast, Ike," Patton said, his voice gruff with urgency. "Every minute we waste, more of our men are dying." Eisenhower nodded grimly. "I know, George, but we need to be strategic about this. We can't just throw bodies at the problem and hope for the best. This weapon of theirs..." He shook his head, at a loss. Just then, a young lieutenant burst into the tent, eyes wide with panic. "Sirs, you need to come quick. We've intercepted a transmission from the Germans. You need to hear this."
Patton and Eisenhower exchanged a worried glance and followed the lieutenant to the radio room. The operator handed them the headphones, his hands shaking. Patton pressed the earphones to his head, Eisenhower listening intently beside him. At first, all they could hear was static and muffled voices. But then, a chilling message began to emerge. "Repeat, this is General Richter of the German High Command. The Führer has authorized the use of our secret weapon. Unleash it on the American forces in the Ardennes. Leave no survivors." Patton felt his blood run cold. My God, they're really going to do it. They're going to use that thing against our men. Eisenhower's face had gone pale. "We have to stop them, George. We have to get our troops out of there before it's too late." But before they could react, another transmission crackled to life, this one even more disturbing. "Attention, Allied forces. This is Colonel Henry Wentworth." Patton and Eisenhower both stiffened at the sound of the traitor's voice. "By now, you've undoubtedly heard about the weapon the Germans are preparing to use. Let me assure you, it is every bit as terrifying as you imagine." Wentworth paused, and they could almost hear the twisted smile in his voice. "However, I'm afraid I have an even more devastating announcement. You see, I've been working with the Germans for years, and our plans go far beyond a simple offensive in the Ardennes." Patton gripped the headphones, his knuckles turning white. "What are you talking about, you bastard?" Wentworth's voice became almost gleeful. "I'm talking about the end of the war, General Patton. The end of the Allies, and the dawn of a new, German-led world order." Eisenhower's face was etched with horror. "What have you done? What have I done?" Wentworth echoed, a chilling laugh escaping his lips. "I've brought about the destruction of everything you hold dear. You see, the weapon the Germans are about to unleash is only the beginning." Patton felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean?" "I mean that the Ardennes offensive is merely a distraction. While your forces are being decimated, my network of spies and saboteurs have been working tirelessly to ensure the destruction of your entire war effort." Wentworth's voice dropped to a menacing whisper. "As we speak, my operatives have infiltrated your supply lines, your communications, even your own military command. They've laid the groundwork for a series of devastating attacks that will cripple the Allies beyond repair." Eisenhower's face was etched with horror. "You're lying! You couldn't have." "Oh, but I have, General Eisenhower," Wentworth interrupted. "And the worst part is, you have no idea how deep the betrayal runs. You've been blind to my machinations for years, and now it's too late to stop me." Patton felt a surge of rage. "You bastard! When I get my hands on you, I'll—" "You'll what, General Patton?" Wentworth's voice dripped with contempt.
"Kill me? It's already too late for that. By the time you realize the full extent of my plans, it will be too late to do anything about it." Eisenhower's mind was racing, trying to comprehend the unthinkable. "What are you talking about? What have you done?" Wentworth's reply was chilling. "Let's just say that the destruction in the Ardennes will pale in comparison to what's about to happen. The Allies are about to face their darkest hour yet." Patton felt a surge of panic. "You son of a bitch! Tell us what you've done!" But Wentworth only laughed, the sound sending a chill down Patton's spine. "You'll find out soon enough, General. Enjoy what little time you have left." The transmission went silent, leaving Patton and Eisenhower staring at each other in stunned disbelief. "Ike, we have to stop him," Patton said, his voice trembling with a rare hint of fear. "We have to find out what he's done and stop it before it's too late." Eisenhower's expression was grave. "I know, George, but where do we even start? Wentworth has been betraying us for years, and he's got spies and saboteurs everywhere. We're running out of time." Patton's fists clenched in frustration. "Then we'll have to work faster than we ever have before. We can't let that bastard win. Too many lives are at stake." Eisenhower nodded, his resolve hardening. "You're right. We need to mobilize every resource we have, call in every favor, and uncover the full extent of Wentworth's treachery. We have to stop him no matter what." The two generals rushed out of the radio room, their minds racing. The fate of the entire war, and possibly the world, hung in the balance. They couldn't afford to fail, not now, not when the enemy had struck such a devastating blow. As they assembled their top intelligence officers and began the desperate search for answers, Patton couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled in the pit of his stomach. Wentworth had been playing them all along, and the consequences of his betrayal were almost unimaginable. What other horrors had the traitor unleashed? What nightmarish plans did he have in store for the Allies? Patton and Eisenhower knew they had to find out, and fast. The clock was ticking, and they couldn't afford to waste a single moment. The fate of the world was in their hands, and they couldn't afford to fail. But as they delved deeper into the web of Wentworth's treachery, they began to realize that they might be facing an enemy that was far more powerful and unforgiving than they ever could have imagined. The chapter ends with a sense of urgency and dread, leaving the reader desperate to know what Wentworth has done and how Patton and Eisenhower will be able to stop him before it's too late. Here is the final chapter, approximately 1,600 words, that concludes the story. Man, the stuff that went down after Patton and Eisenhower heard Wentworth's chilling message, it was just crazy. The fate of the whole war, maybe even the world, hanging by a thread. Those two generals, they knew they had to act fast if they had any chance of stopping that traitor's plans. They rallied every intelligence officer and saboteur they could get their hands on, trying to uncover the full scope of Wentworth's betrayal. And let me tell you, what they found was downright terrifying. Turns out, Wentworth and his network of spies had their fingers in just about every part of the Allied war machine. They'd been feeding the Germans critical intel for years, sabotaging supply lines, even manipulating troop movements to give the Nazis the upper hand. And all the while, they were setting the stage for one final devastating blow. The weapon the Germans were about to unleash in the Ardennes, that was just the start. Wentworth had his people rigged to trigger a whole series of attacks that would cripple the Allies beyond repair. Explosions, disruptions, you name it. It was like the guy had thought of everything. Patton, he was livid. I mean, the guy was already a powder keg, but when he heard just how deep Wentworth's betrayal ran, he was fit to be tied. He was pacing the command tent, cursing up a storm, ready to personally track down that traitor and tear him limb from limb. Eisenhower, on the other hand, he was more focused. Gotta hand it to him. The guy kept a cool head even in the face of all that chaos. He knew they needed to move fast, but he also knew they had to be smart about it. One wrong move, and it could be game over for the Allies. So they got to work, pulling out all the stops. Patton leading the charge to reinforce the troops in the Ardennes, while Eisenhower coordinated a massive counterintelligence operation to root out Wentworth's network of spies and saboteurs. It was a race against the clock, let me tell you. Every minute they were getting more reports of German advances, of that terrifying new weapon tearing through their forces. And they knew that once Wentworth's other attacks started kicking in, it would be even worse. But Patton and Eisenhower, they refused to back down. They threw everything they had at the problem, calling in every favor, pulling out all the stops. And slowly, oh so slowly, they started to turn the tide. Their intel team, they managed to crack the code on Wentworth's network, tracing the web of spies and saboteurs back to their sources. And let me tell you, when they started taking those guys down one by one, it was a sight to behold. Patton, he was like a man possessed, leading the charge in the Ardennes, rallying the troops, even going so far as to commandeer a tank and drive it straight into the heart of the German assault. The guy was a force of nature, I tell you. And Eisenhower, he was the one keeping it all together, coordinating the counterattacks, making the tough calls, never losing his cool even when the situation looked bleak.
That man, he was the glue that held the whole thing together. It was a brutal, bloody fight, but eventually they started to gain the upper hand. The German offensive in the Ardennes was slowly ground to a halt, their secret weapon proving to be not quite as invincible as Wentworth had boasted. And as for Wentworth's other attacks, well, the Allies managed to foil them one by one thanks to the tireless work of their intelligence team. It was a close call, but they were able to stop the bastards' plans before they could do any real, lasting damage. But the final showdown, that was the real nail-biter. Patton and Eisenhower, they knew they had to track down Wentworth and put an end to his treachery once and for all. So they rallied their best men, their most trusted officers, and launched a massive operation to flush the traitor out of his hiding place. It was a tense, high-stakes game of cat and mouse, let me tell you. Wentworth, he was slippery, always one step ahead. But Patton and Eisenhower, they were relentless. They chased him all the way across Europe, never letting up, never giving him a moment's rest. And then, finally, they cornered him. In some backwater town in Germany, Wentworth had nowhere left to run. Patton, he was the one who found him, facing off against that snake in the grass one last time. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Patton, he had his gun trained on Wentworth, his finger just itching to pull the trigger. But Wentworth, he was calm, almost serene. He knew he was beat, but he still had one last trick up his sleeve. "Go ahead, Patton," he said, that slimy grin on his face. "Shoot me, but you'll never stop what's coming. The Allies are finished, and the Reich will rise again." Patton, he hesitated for just a moment. He knew Wentworth was probably bluffing, trying to rattle him. But then the traitor pulled something from his coat pocket, and Patton realized with a sinking feeling that he wasn't bluffing at all. It was a detonator, rigged to some kind of explosive. Wentworth, he had it all planned out. If Patton pulled the trigger, the whole town would go up in flames. Innocent lives, wiped out in an instant. Patton, he was torn. He wanted nothing more to put a bullet between Wentworth's eyes, to make that bastard pay for all the lives he'd destroyed. But he also knew he couldn't risk all those civilians.
It was a hell of a choice, let me tell you. But then, Eisenhower, he stepped in. Calm as can be, he walked up to Wentworth, staring him down. "It's over, Wentworth. Your plan has failed and you've lost. Give it up before you make things even worse." Wentworth, he just laughed. "It's never over, Eisenhower. The Führer's vision will live on long after I'm gone, and there's nothing you can do to stop it." Eisenhower, he didn't flinch. "Maybe so, but at least we can stop you."
And then, quicker than the eye could follow, Eisenhower lunged forward, knocking the detonator from Wentworth's hand. The two men grappled, wrestling for control, until finally, Eisenhower managed to overpower the traitor, pinning him to the ground. Patton, he stood there, watching the whole thing unfold, his gun still trained on Wentworth. He wanted so badly to pull the trigger, to end that snake's life right then and there. But he knew he couldn't, not with all those civilians around. So instead, he just stood there, his face a mask of fury and disgust, as Eisenhower had the MPs haul Wentworth away. That traitor, he was spitting curses, swearing up and down that the Allies were doomed. But Patton and Eisenhower, they just ignored him, their eyes locked in a silent understanding. They'd won. They'd stopped Wentworth's plan, foiled his twisted schemes, and saved the Allies from a fate worse than death. It had been a close call, no doubt about it. But in the end, their dedication, their unwavering commitment to the cause, had carried the day. The war, it wasn't over yet. The Nazis, they were still a force to be reckoned with, and the path to victory was still long and treacherous. But with Patton and Eisenhower at the helm, the Allies had a fighting chance. And as for Wentworth, well, they made sure that snake got what was coming to him. Justice, swift and merciless, for all the lives he'd destroyed. The guy he rotted away in a prison cell, cursing the Allies until the end. But Patton and Eisenhower, they didn't let it get to them. They had a war to win, a world to save, and they weren't about to let the likes of Wentworth stand in their way. So they rallied troops, fortified their defenses, and prepared for the final decisive push. The road ahead was going to be tough, no doubt about it, but with those two generals leading the charge, the Allies knew they had a fighting chance. In the end, it was a hard-won victory, forged in the crucible of sacrifice and struggle. But when the dust finally settled, Patton and Eisenhower, they knew it had all been worth it. The Allies had prevailed, and the world was finally free from the shadow of the Reich. And as for those two generals, well, they went down in history as the titans who had faced the abyss and emerged victorious. Their legacy, it would live on forever, a testament to the power of courage, determination, and unwavering commitment to a cause greater than themselves. Yeah, man, that whole story, it's the stuff of legends, a clash of titans, a betrayal that shook the very foundations of the war, and a final epic showdown that would decide the fate of the world. It's the kind of thing they'll be talking about for generations to come. But you know what the best part is? In the end, Patton and Eisenhower, they proved that even in the face of the darkest adversity, the Allies and the values they fought for could never be truly defeated.
They stood tall, they fought hard, and they emerged victorious, no matter the cost. That's the kind of story that really sticks with you, you know? The kind that reminds you that even when the odds seem insurmountable, even when the enemy seems invincible, the human spirit can still triumph. It's a lesson we could all use, especially in these uncertain times. So there you have it, my friend, the epic tale of Patton, Eisenhower, and the traitor Wentworth.